Today I'm going to teach you how to make a contemporary Dreamcatcher. To begin with, I'll tell you a little bit about the origin of the Dreamcatcher. The Dreamcatcher is a Native American tradition. It was originated by the Ojibwe people, and the Dreamcatcher is believed to protect sleeping individuals, especially children, from bad dreams. During the night, bad dreams get caught in the Dreamcatcher's web, while good dreams can pass through the hole in the center of the web and find their way to the dreamer. Any bad dreams will be caught in the web and will perish when the sun rises in the morning. Traditional dreamcatchers were made out of materials such as reeds, sinew, leather, but we're going to just use modern day materials such as yarn, shower curtain rings, masking tape, and Elmer's glue, and you'll also need a pair of scissors and a needle to complete this project. These two are examples of completed contemporary dreamcatchers. So this will give you an idea of what it's going to look like at the end. You can pick between 1 and 4 colors for your outer ring, and you're going to pick 1 color for your inside web. When you select your colors, think about your color relationships that you learned from the color theory unit, as your final design will be part of your grade for this project, and your color selection is a major part of the design. Take your shower curtain ring and make sure it's snapped together. You can see they come apart, so make sure it's actually snapped together. And you can see that there's a little dip here and the hole on the edge. We need to just get a piece of masking tape. And we're going to start wrapping that masking tape on a diagonal so that we cover up the hole and the little dip. It doesn't matter if this is super neat and pretty. It's going to be completely covered by the time we finish the Dreamcatcher. The important part is that you don't have this huge dip here that would make you need to wrap the yarn many, many more times around to make it look good. If you want to do this on your own, you can find any type of ring. Sometimes there are metal rings, or you can make a ring out of wood, or weeping willow branches, anything you want that starts out as a ring shape. I have already pre-cut my yarn. I've picked this brown, cream, and red color to be the outside colors, and the yarn is butterflied so that it won't be tangled. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and unravel my yarn. So I'll move everything else out of the way. This other color, the tan here, is for the inside, so that's going to stay butterflied so it doesn't get tangled for now. So I'm just going to go ahead and unravel my yarn. I'm going to let it go off the edge of the table there. And I'm going to put the ends together with my new color. Unravel that one. And again, I put the ends of all 3 colors next to each other. And before I start, I want to just go along the whole length of this and make sure that all 3 strands are lined up and go together, and that there's no knots or tangles. If your yarn is not exactly the same length at the end, that's fine. You can cut it so it's the same if you want to, or you can wait until you finish wrapping and you can cut it then. Now that my yarn is all lined and neat, I'm ready to begin wrapping my Dreamcatcher. So I'm going to take my shower curtain ring, and this is a fiber quill method, and I'm going to put the ends of the yarn right on top of the shower curtain ring. And then I'm going to pull the yarn through the middle of the ring, and I need to pull it all the way through. It's really important that you don't try to do the next wrap until you pull it all the way through. It'll get really tangled on you. Then I'm going to pull these 3 strings over the top, back through the center again, and again I'm going to pull that all the way through. Now the really important part here is you can see the ends of my yarn go that direction, so I need to wrap towards the ends of my yarn. That's going to lock the yarn into place, and it's not going to come undone on me later. If I wrap the opposite direction and went away from the yarn, then the yarn could unwrap behind me and all of my hard work could be undone. So again, I'm wrapping towards the ends of the yarn so I cover it up. So I'm going to keep all of my colors in the same order so that I have a nice pattern. I'm going to lay them really nice and neat right here so that they don't have any shower ring or tape showing through them. Pull it through the middle again. Make sure that you pull it all the way through before you wrap over the top again. All right, so I'm going to show you again When I wrap over the top, I make sure that all of these strings stay in the same order, so I'm forming a pattern, and I'm making sure they're right next to each other so that there's no shower curtain ring or tape showing through the middle. Then I'm going to come back, pull all the way through. Once I pull all the way through, I can go around the top again, keeping the string in the same order, making sure that there's no space in between the strings so that I don't have the shower curtain ring or the tape showing. Pull all the way through again, and we're going to just keep repeating this process, and you'll see as I'm going, I'm covering up that yarn so it's locking it in place, and I'm going to start working a little faster now. And the important thing is that each time I go through the center of the ring, I make sure that I pull it all the way through before I go over the top. Once I go over the top, I keep my colors in the same order and I lay them together nicely and neatly. And once you get a good rhythm, you can see this can go pretty quickly. Again, always pull the yarn all the way through. Keep them in the same order when you wrap over the top. Make sure that no shower curtain ring or tape is showing. You can see that that wrap right there just finished covering the yarn ends, so now there's no yarn ends showing. And I'm going to just keep wrapping around until I get to the end. And I think we'll cut ahead to when I finished wrapping. All right, and we are almost done wrapping the ring now. Just as one more reminder, every time I go over the top, then I pull it all the way through before going over again. I keep my string all in the same order when I go back over so that I have a nice pattern. And actually it's getting a little twisted right there. There we go. And in about 1 or 2 more wraps, I should be ready to show you how to finish off the wrapping process. You might decide to go an extra 1 or 2 wraps over where you began just to make sure that you don't end up having your shower ring show when you finish it. That should be good. All right, so if you look all the way around the ring, you can see there's no shower ring, there's no tape showing, it's all covered in yarn. My pattern is consistent all the way through, it's very nice and neat. That's what we're looking for the fiber pole wrapping. I'm going to now cut the extra yarn so that there's only about 6 inches left or so, about this much. It doesn't have to be exact. And you want to cut with the back of your scissors so that you get a nice crisp edge when you cut this. And I did not get a crisp edge on that one string, so I'm going to want to fix that up because otherwise it's going to be hard to thread my needle. There we go, that's better. All right, now those of you that have done fiber crafts and threaded needles at home, you might have learned from your parents that you lick your thread to thread a needle. And that is a technique that if you're home, that's fine, but we really don't want to do that at school because it's going to spread lots of germs around. We don't want to spread the colds, the flus around. So please, please, please do not lick your thread. I'm going to teach you another way of doing this. Make sure that all of your yarn ends are lined up. Pull them until they're just barely showing above your fingers, and just kind of twist your fingers back and forth slightly so they get a little compacted. And you should just barely see the yarn between your fingers. Okay. Keep your fingers really close together, really tight. Do not release the pressure. Then take the eye of your needle, that's the opening in your needle, and just push it in between your fingers without releasing that pressure. And the yarn will start to come through, and then you can grab the yarn ends and you can thread your needle really neatly and easily without licking it. Okay. Now when I did that, the last couple wraps of my yarn got a little looser, so I'm going to just really quickly neaten those back up. And I'm going to make sure that I have the yarn stopping on the inside of the ring and right where the yarn is ending, not way over here, not way over here, right where the yarn is ending. I'm going to push my needle underneath as many rows that I wrapped around the ring as possible. The more the better, the less likely it is to unwrap later. And this part sometimes can take a little bit of wiggling and maneuvering to get it to really go under, especially if you did a nice job and wrapped really tightly. I'm gonna try one more time. There we go. And the more rows you can get under, the more secure it's going to be when you're done. Okay. So what you can see is this is where the yarn ended. You can see that the needle is entering right there and that it's exiting over here. We're then going to try to pull the needle through. Again, if you wrapped it really tight, you might find that your fingers are slipping off. You can try wiggling it. I could probably get this through right now, but I want to show you what to do if you can't. You just take a piece of your masking tape, fold it in half over your needle, and all that's going to do is it's going to give you a better grip. And then you'll be able to just kind of wiggle it slowly, and you should be able to pull your needle through. Then just pull slowly, because if you pull too tight, you might pull your rows that are wrapped around the ring, and they might end up having some of the ring showing. So we're going to just pull it as snug as we can. You might even pull one string at a time. And now we've got it all snugged up. And if you did pull a little too hard and you can see any of your ring, you can kind of wiggle the yarn back and forth until the ring is covered again. In this case, I did not do that, so I don't have to worry about it, but you can fix it if you didn't do it right. And then there's this yarn coming out here. We're going to take our scissors, and we're just going to cut as close as we can to the ring. If you have a little bit sticking out, then you're just going to kind of wiggle back and forth slightly to hide those ends a little better. And now your ring is completely covered and we're ready to do the webbing. You also want to go ahead and save any leftover long pieces of yarn. You'll be able to use those for the braid to make your loop later. And to butterfly the yarn so that it doesn't get tangled on you, just hold it in the palm of your hand, wrap the yarn around until there's only a little bit left. And mine's a little tangled down here, so I'm going to untangle that. There we go. And then when you have just a little bit of yarn left, slide the yarn off your hand and wrap the last little bit the opposite direction around the center. And the reason that is called a butterfly is that you have the two wings on either side and the body in the middle. I'm going to take this tape off my needle so that my needle is ready for the next thing that I need it for. And these little pieces of yarn wouldn't be good for anything else, so you can go ahead and throw those away. This is the yarn that I chose to make my web with. I'm going to go ahead and unravel it. And I'm going to just tie a knot around the ring. I want to leave a very short tail, like maybe about 3 inches or so. Okay, so you can see that one side I just have the short little tail, and the rest is the longer piece of the yarn. I'm going to wrap the short tail around the long piece one more time and make a second knot. And then I'm going to pull that knot so that it's on the center of the ring. So now the knot's on the inside, and we have a short tail and a long piece of yarn attached to the ring. We're going to take our needle and we're going to thread the short one. It should be easier to thread since it's just one piece of yarn than the previous time. And the important thing right here is you want the needle to go right under where the knot is. So I'm not going far away from the knot. I'm making sure to put the needle right under the knot. And I'm going to go under as many rows of the wrapping as I can. Okay. So you can see there's the knot. The needle's exiting or entering right underneath and exiting several rows away. Pull that through, pull it nice and snug. Now the reason we did this is if you cut yarn very close to a knot, the knot is very likely to come undone. But if we have a little bit of extra yarn under here, we can cut it here and it will be hidden so it won't look bad, but our knot is more secure and it won't come undone on us later. So then we're going to go ahead and snip that off as close as we can. And now our yarn is very securely attached and we're ready to begin the webbing process. This is the Contemporary Dreamcatcher handout that I gave you with this project, and you can see that there's some diagrams that basically show what we're going to be doing, and then this center diagram is the one that I really want you to pay attention to as we go. And it's going to be how you check that you're making sure you're doing the webbing correctly. To begin with, you're going to make a little U that goes to the top part of the ring, and then you're going to come back and pull yarn through the center, but it needs to be in the middle of the U. If it's on the outside of the U, that won't work. To see if you did it correctly, you're going to look at that center diagram there, and you're just going to see if the yarn makes the same type of loop that's in that picture, which it does. And we're going to go ahead and pull it tight. If you want to make a really complex web that has a lot of rows, you want to make your loops very close together. If you want to make a simpler web, you can make them further apart. Many of my students like to have 5 points of contact on the outside, and then their web ends up looking like a star when they're finished. So I'm going to repeat this process. I'm going to decide how far apart I want my loops spaced. I'm going over the top, making a U, and then pulling the yarn back in between that U shape. Before I pull it tight, I just check the diagram again. Look at the center, and does my yarn make a loop like that? If it doesn't make a loop like that, I need to redo that one. What you'll find out is as you're working, if you don't hold the previous loop tight, it'll loosen up as you're going. So I'm holding that one tight, and now I'm going to pull the second loop tight. And I'm going to keep repeating this around the web. So now I'm going to keep my non-dominant hand over my second loop. That'll keep it tight. I'm making my U shape. I'm pulling my thread back through the ring in the middle of the U. I check my loop to make sure it's the same as the diagram, and then I pull it tight. Move my non-dominant fingers to where the newest loop is, make the U, and then pull through the center of the U. Make sure it's spaced where I want it, check that the loop looks the same as the diagram, pull it tight, move my non-dominant fingers to the newest loop, make another U, pull the string through the center of the U, check my spacing, check that the loop looks like it does in the diagram, pull it tight, and then I'm going to do one more loop over my first one, so again a U, but it's going to end where the first one began. Pull my string through the center of the U, pull it tight, and now we have finished the first row, and this last side on the diagram starts to show what you do when you are doing your second row, and you'll see that instead of going to the outside, we're going to go in the middle of the first loop that we made. So I'm going to hold with my non-dominant fingers where this last loop was, and this time I'm going to grab the end of my yarn, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going to this first straight string, going over top of it, then over top of the next one, then over top of the next one, and I can keep repeating this in a spiral until I get the web to the level I want it to look. If I want it really intricate, I'll do it more times. If I want it simple, I'll do it less. So I have the end of my yarn in my hand, and I'm just going to push it over top of the first straight string that should be at the top of the ring if you're holding the last loop in place. And then if I do that, these two strings are hanging down, so it's basically my U, but it's really big now. And I'm going to pull this in between the middle of those two strings that are hanging down, and I'm going to pull it nice and tight. So before I do pull it tight, I can check this loop should still look the same as the middle diagram. If it does, you're doing it correctly. If there's not a loop, it's not correct. Pull it tight on the middle of that straight string, and you'll see it'll pull that down so it kind of comes to a point. Grab that little loop with your non-dominant fingers, so the next straight section should be at the top. Hold the edge of the string, push it over the top. If I let the two ends hang down, I'm going to come in between the middle of those. Before I pull it super tight, I can check, does my loop look like it does in the diagram? If it does, it's correct. I'm going to pull it tight on the middle of that straight string, and you can see that pulls it to a point. I move my non-dominant fingers onto the new loop. Grab the end of the string, going over the next straight space. The two ends are hanging down. I come right in the middle of those. Before I pull it tight, check that my loop looks like it does in the diagram. If it does, you can go ahead and pull it tight. Move your non-dominant fingers to the new loop. Get the end of your yarn again. Go over the next straight space. Pull it through the middle of the 2 strings hanging down. Check that you have a loop like the diagram. If you do, pull it tight. Move your non-dominant fingers to the next space. Now I like to do this without a needle with my fingers, but if you do it a really complicated web, you might find at some point you do need to thread this with a needle. You will be doing the exact same thing. Going over the top of the next straight space, coming in the middle of the 2 that are hanging down, checking that you have a loop, and then pulling it tight. The only thing a needle will do is allow you to get into the space if it starts to get too small. Coming to the end of the string, going over the top, pulling between the 2 that are hanging down, checking that I have a loop, pulling it tight. Now this one's a little tricky right here. So this straight string, we need to get in between these 2 straight strings that are right there. Okay. And again, I like to do it without a needle personally, but if you have a hard time getting it pushed in between there, you most certainly can thread your needle. I'm letting these ends hang down. I pull the end of the yarn through the middle of the 2 that are hanging down, pull it nice and tight, and now I can decide I've completed a row, so if I wanted I could end my web there and make it look like that, or I can keep going. If I want to keep going, then I'm going to go to the next straight space. Like I said, it makes a spiral over the top, through the center, pull it tight, and I'm going to go ahead and finish that row since I started it, and then I'm going to end my web. So I get the end of my yarn, go over the next straight space, these 2 are hanging down, I check that I have my loop, I pull it tight, move my non-dominant fingers over top of the new loop, end of the yarn goes over the next straight space, in between the 2 that are hanging down, pull it back through, check that you have a loop, pull it tight, move your fingers to the non-dominant fingers to the next loop. We only have a few more to go. Over the top, through the center of the yarn hanging down. I checked that I had my loop, pulled it tight, and I'm almost around for my third row. And I'm just going to do that real quick, and then I'll show you how to finish this. So as soon as you like the way the web looks, you can end it, and I'm pretty happy with this. So what I need to do is tie a double knot. So I have this loop here that can kind of move back and forth on this row. I think it looks a little bit better when I pull it to the right. So I'm going to tie to the string right here to anchor it into place to that string where I think it looks the best. I'm just going to push my yarn over that string, and I'm going to pull through the middle of the 2 that are hanging down. This is going to form my first knot if I pull it nice and tight. Oh, that broke. Okay, normally we would do that a second time, and that would make it secure. And we would just go around that string one more time through the middle, pull it tight, and then we would cut it short and we would put a dot of glue on both sides to secure it. Unfortunately, I do not have enough string left from where it broke to tie a new knot, and there's not really a way to add any more string. So I'm going to just go ahead and demo the rest of the process, but I would really recommend the second knot. Hopefully putting the glue on this will make it secure enough that it doesn't fall apart later. So I'm going to just trim this short, get some of the clutter out so you can see what I'm doing a little better. And I'm just going to take some Elmer's glue, and I'm just going to put a little dot here and a little dot here, and because I don't have my second knot, I'm going to be a little heavy on the glue, and just kind of dab it into place. Now it shows up a lot right now because it's white, but it'll dry clear. And so when this dries, you won't really notice it at all. Now, even though it doesn't have the double knot, this should be okay. The glue should hold it in place. The double knot would give it an extra level of security because if one knot came undone, you would still be able to add some more glue at that point and keep it together. So this is our web, it's completed. We're gonna let this glue dry while we make a braid that will form the loop to finish up our Dreamcatcher. To make the braid, we're gonna go ahead and unwrap the butterflied yarn that we saved from earlier. You need 3 pieces of yarn to make a braid. I'm gonna use all 3 of the colors that I have. You could also use just one color cut into 3 pieces, or you could use 2 of one color and 1 of another color. All right, so I've unraveled my butterflied yarn. I have my yarn ends together. I'm going to just tie a little knot up here. And that is going to allow me to tape down onto the table. So just hold the yarn in place while I braid. And a lot of you might already know how to braid, but if you don't, it's a pretty simple process. And to decide how big of a loop, how big of a braid you need to make, you need to decide what size loop you want. So you can do just a short little loop for hanging it. I've had some students who want to wear it as necklaces, so they have to make the loop big enough to go around their head in that case. You can make whatever size loop you want. Now the braid needs to be a little bit more than twice as long. So if I'm going to make a loop about this long again, I need about, that's the first, doubled, and then I need a little bit extra because the braid is going to get a little bit shorter as I braid. And then also the process of attaching the loop takes up a lot of extra yarn too. So make your yarn a little bit more than twice as long as you want your final loop to be for the braid. So once you have your yarn prepared for the braid, you're going to hold your yarn with 2 strands in one hand. And the way that I do that is I kind of grab the first strand with my bottom 3 fingers and the second strand in between my thumb and index finger. Then I'm going to hold the other one kind of back in the bottom 3 of the other hand. All braiding is taking the hand that has 2, the outer string is going to move over to the new hand and become the new middle. And then I'm just going to kind of tighten that up. So the string that, the hand that has 2, the string on the outside switches over and becomes the new middle. And each time you just want to snug it up. Outside becomes the new middle by switching hands. Outside becomes the new middle by switching hands. And we just keep repeating that process. The string on the outside of the hand with 2 switches over, becomes the new middle. We snug it up. String on the outside of the hand with 2 switches over and becomes the new middle. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing that and finish up this braid really quick. And again, it's the kind of thing that once you get used to, you can braid pretty quickly. Don't forget to tighten it up in between so you have a nice tight braid. And again, each time you just switch the outside string on the hand with 2 becomes the new middle and switches hands. Okay, once you have finished your braid, you just go ahead and untape it. And I'm going to just take my braid and I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to grab my Dreamcatcher and I'm going to decide where do I want the top to be. So I'm going to just put the top right here where it's thicker, but you might have a different section that looks better. Wherever you want the top to be. You're going to take the folded end of the braid and you're going to push that through. So now we have half of the braid on one side of the ring and half the braid on the other. The side that's folded, go ahead and stick your fingers between like this and pull the 2 loose ends through the loop of the folded side. And then just kind of snug it up into place. And you can see it'll be attached really nicely and really neatly and very securely to the top of your Dreamcatcher. To seal up the top, to finish up the loop, we're going to make a circle with the braid and just push the 2 loose ends of the braid through that circle. And then snug up your knot. You can see now we have a nice section to hang the braid with. And then right above this knot, I'm just going to take my pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut the yarn nice and even. And that is the finished Dreamcatcher. Now before you turn it into me, you're going to need to put your name on it, and this is what you're going to do. If your tape is still in good shape from when you braid it, you can use that tape or you can get a new piece of tape. but we're just going to fold this piece of tape in half over one side of the braid and try to fold it nice and neat so that it's like exactly over itself so it's not sticky. And then you might have a little bit that's uneven, so just take your scissors and trim off any part that's sticky. Check if there's any that's sticky on the top or the bottom, and if there is, just trim off that little bit that's sticky there so that when you put these in the basket they won't get stuck to anyone else's. And then just get a Sharpie and write your name here, and you can turn it into the classwork bin.